The security guards noticed the man right away. Not only was he acting strangely, skulking about the store, but he looked strange too. He was clearly wearing a wig, and as it turned out, a fake mustache. They watched him pocket a single Band-Aid and a sandwich. Before leaving the supermarket, he also swiped a newspaper. Security guards summoned the police. The officers didn't know it yet, but the odd, haggard, seemingly homeless shoplifter with no eyebrows was actually billionaire and fugitive Robert Durst. His pockets were full, stuffed with the stolen sandwich and $500. Another $37,000 was found in the trunk of his rented car. It was a story so bizarre it defied belief. Wanted for the grisly murder of a cranky drifter and suspected in the mob-style execution of a Hollywood writer, the heir to one of Manhattan's most powerful families was caught shoplifting a $6 sandwich, chicken salad, from a Pennsylvania supermarket. He was miles away from the rundown Texas town, where he'd been living incognito for the last few months, passing himself off as a mute woman. And if that wasn't enough, his beautiful blonde wife mysteriously disappeared in 1982, right after filing for divorce. Sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Kathy McCormick had style and grace. She always looked like $1,000,000, even when she was just scraping by. The youngest child in a close-knit middle-class Irish Catholic family, Kathy was a pretty, popular girl with hair the color of honey and a big, bright white smile. People noticed her and she liked the attention. As a teenager, Kathy was a sight to behold, tooling around Long Island in her '67 Chevy, her hair flowing through the open car window. She wasn't stuck up. She just exuded a quiet self-confidence. At 19, Kathy McCormick moved to Manhattan, renting a small apartment in one of the many buildings owned by the Durst organization. A dental hygienist at the time, she met Robert Durst when he came around to collect the rent. The wealthy scion of the Durst family was immediately taken with the elegant blonde woman, and Kathy was smitten with Robert. Nearly a decade older than Kathy, Robert wasn't great-looking, but he was dark and mysterious and well-connected. He had been a regular at the legendary Studio 54 disco, and he knew many celebrities. A few dates later, the couple decided to move to Vermont, where they opened up a health food store. They were happy and things were going well, until Seymour Durst pressured his son to return to New York and to the family business. Kathy and Robert moved back to the city. They got married and embarked on a cross-country trek for their honeymoon, taking the dog along with them. Robert was odd and had his quirks, but Kathy loved him, and she was both patient and accepting of his shortcomings. At first, explained Kathy's brother, Jim McCormick, it was as though Cinderella had married Prince Charming. He had the resources to do the things she dreamed of doing. Unfortunately, the happy couple didn't stay happy very long. Robert was secretive and frequently took off by himself for days at a time. Around Kathy's friends and family, he was laconic, to the point of being rude. Kathy realized she needed a career of her own and enrolled in medical school. On paper, of course, Kathy's life looked fabulous. A millionaire husband, a house in Westchester, 2 apartments in New York City, glamorous parties, and just 3 months away from becoming a doctor. In reality, Kathy was in the midst of a life crisis. Her marriage was falling apart. She loved Robert, but his behavior had become increasingly bizarre, and he was abusive. To top it off, Durst was carrying on with Prudence Farrow, actress Mia Farrow's sister, and the inspiration for the Beatles' song Dear Prudence. Prudence was pressuring Durst to leave his wife and was not shy about her relationship with him. Durst, a man worth billions, was now refusing to pay for Kathy's medical school tuition. Robert was notoriously stingy, and Kathy often had to borrow money from her friends just to pay for gas and tolls. She was broke and depressed. The prospect of becoming a doctor was the one thing that kept Kathy from completely falling apart. She wanted to work in the emergency room. Working in the ER was really the essence of being a doctor, she told her brother Jim. You get to give people who are truly hurt both emotional and physical care. Kathy found the experience very rewarding. In early January, Kathy had an occasion to visit the emergency room, not as a doctor but as a patient. Her face was bruised and she had a minor head injury. She admitted that her husband had been violent with her, but refused to press charges against him. The couple began to avoid each other as much as possible, which wasn't difficult considering they owned homes on Manhattan's east and west sides, and in Westchester County. When Kathy was in the city, Bob was in the country. A social butterfly who drank and partied occasionally, Kathy began to get high to deal with her problems. She was missing classes and her grades started to plummet. She tried desperately to salvage her marriage, but it was clearly too late. Friends advised her to file for divorce. Kathy knew Durst would refuse to pay her alimony, which she felt she deserved. Reluctantly, she consulted a divorce attorney. On Sunday, January 31st, 1982, Gilberte Najami was hosting a dinner party at her home when Kathy Durst arrived unexpectedly. Najami was startled to see her normally well-dressed friend wearing sweatpants and looking disheveled. Kathy was distressed, and over the next few hours drank a considerable amount of wine. Robert Durst called around 7 p.m. After handing the phone to Kathy, Najami could hear Robert screaming at his wife on the other end. Kathy hung up the phone and got her coat. "I have to leave," she said. "Bobby wants me home. He's really upset." Najami saw Kathy to the door. The two women made plans to meet for dinner the next day. "If anything happens to me, check out Bobby," Kathy told Najami. When Kathy failed to show up for their dinner date on Monday, Najami began to worry. She called Kathy but got no answer. Najami says she had a gut feeling that something terrible had happened to her friend. By Thursday, Najami was convinced Kathy was dead. She went to the police. 5 days after Kathy disappeared, Robert Durst filed his own missing persons report in Manhattan. He sauntered into the police station with his dog and nonchalantly told detectives that he wanted to report his wife, Kathy, missing. He'd last seen her on Sunday. She'd arrived at their South Salem home drunk and angry, he said. The couple argued, and then Durst drove her to the Katona train station in time to catch the 9:15 train to New York City. Police were not able to confirm whether Kathy ever reached Manhattan. When asked why he waited so long to report his wife missing, Durst explained that the couple often spent days apart without any communication. The detectives were struck by how blasé he was about the situation. Durst said he suspected Kathy had a boyfriend, a drug dealer who may have murdered her. He was disparaging, telling them that Kathy was a coke fiend. Durst said he had drinks with neighbors after dropping Kathy off at the station. Later, when the neighbors denied seeing him, Durst changed his story. He said he'd stopped and had a meal at a cafe. He claimed to have called and spoken to Kathy in Manhattan, proof that she had indeed made it into the city. The detectives told him that they could check phone records, and Durst said he was mistaken. He hadn't called Kathy from the house after all, but from a payphone. The closest phone booth was across the lake, 3 miles from the Durst's stone cottage. Determined to find out what had happened to Kathy, Gilberte Najami conducted her own investigation. She rode the train Kathy allegedly took the night she went missing and interviewed the passengers. The same group of people rode that train every Sunday night, she told a reporter. I talked to all of them. Kathy was not on that train. Najami, not content to wait for police to find Kathy, broke into the Durst's South Salem cottage. There she found the clothes Robert claimed Kathy was wearing when she left for the city Sunday night. She also found Kathy's unopened mail in a garbage pail. Robert Durst offered a $100,000 reward for information about his wife's disappearance. However, he was elusive with detectives and stopped cooperating with their investigation. He also hired a criminal defense attorney. Soon after Kathy went missing, the superintendent of the couple's Riverside Drive apartment claimed he saw Durst disposing of Kathy's belongings. Rumor had it that Durst was already looking to sublet the apartment. The Durst family had money and power, and if they had asked for help in finding Kathy, the city would have responded pronto. Mayor Coach had even called Seymour Durst to offer his help. His offer was declined. Robert Durst was more reticent than ever, and the McCormick family was left in the dark. Kathy's powerful in-laws hadn't bothered to contact them at all. Jim McCormick, who had assumed the role of patriarch after Kathy's father died, was beside himself. Finally, out of desperation, he arranged a meeting with Seymour Durst. They wanted his help, answers, anything. Seymour was cold, officious, and offered nothing. No help, no guidance, not even a glass of water. Seymour's son, Tom Durst, arrived home and kicked Kathy's family out. "Meeting's over. You'll have to leave," he said rudely. "Wait a second," Jim said. "We're talking to your father. We need his help." Tom was unmoved. "I said the meeting is over," he told the McCormicks before unceremoniously ushering them out of the posh apartment. Robert Durst cut off all contact with Kathy's family. His longtime confidant Susan Berman acted as his spokesperson, fielding questions from the press and trying her best to deflect attention away from Robert. Berman, the daughter of mobster Davy Berman, who had been an associate of Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, did her job well. Despite efforts by her friends and family, Kathy's disappearance remained a mystery. "We are convinced that Kathy didn't just walk away. We believe that Durst had something to do with her disappearance," Jim McCormick said. "If Robert Durst knew where Kathy was, he certainly wasn't talking." In 2000, police received a tip that led them to reopen the investigation into Kathy Durst's disappearance. A Westchester man arrested for exposing himself wanted to barter with the DA leniency in exchange for information he claimed to have about Kathy Durst. He told police that he had heard from friends that Kathy was dead and buried in Westchester County. The flashers' tips didn't pan out, but they did re-energize the search for Kathy. Over the last few months, there have been a few developments that I am not at liberty to disclose, Westchester District Attorney Janine Pirro said. Detectives began contacting the key players in the case. On the eve of her scheduled interview with police, Susan Berman was murdered in her Hollywood home, shot in the back of the head. As of this writing, Berman's murder remains unsolved. Some speculate that Berman, who was down on her luck, had been blackmailing her friend Robert Durst. Berman had reportedly confided to a friend that she had information about Kathy's disappearance. Shortly before her death, she received $50,000 from him, much more than the $7,000 she had asked to borrow. Unbeknownst to the McCormicks, Robert Durst had divorced Kathy in 1990 and married Deborah Lee Sharenton, a wealthy realtor whom he had been secretly dating for 10 years, in 2001. Durst severed ties with his own family after his youngest brother was appointed head of the Durst organization. He kept a low profile and seemed to have fallen off the radar. In reality, he was living in Galveston, Texas. Durst had lavish homes around the country, but for reasons known only to him, he took up residence in a $300 a month apartment in a neighborhood populated by drifters and people down on their luck. He dressed in drag and lived as Dorothy Kinner, a mute and rather homely woman. Kinner had a frequent visitor, a man who introduced himself to people as Robert Durst. In fact, it was Durst who had rented the apartment for Sinner. Tenants thought it odd that they never saw Dorothy and Robert at the same time. A man named Morris Black lived across the hall from Robert Durst and Dorothy Sinner. A former seaman, the 71-year-old Black was cantankerous and prone to fly off the handle. Black and Durst became friends, and they often got together to watch television and get drunk. It's unclear whether Black knew that Kinner and Durst were one and the same. At some point, the two men had a falling out. Later, in court, Durst claimed that he returned home one day to find Black in his apartment, armed with a gun. They struggled and the gun went off, accidentally shooting Black in the head. Fearing no one would believe his account of the crime, Durst dismembered Black's body and disposed of the parts in the bay. A few days later, a human torso was found floating in Galveston Bay. The torso had been stuffed into a trash bag. Matching bags found ashore nearby contained more grisly surprises. The body, or rather what was left of it, was identified as Morris Black. His head was nowhere in sight. Robert Durst was arrested after police found a receipt bearing his name in one of the trash bags. Furthermore, a neighbor had witnessed Durst loading trash bags into the trunk of his car the night he and Morris fought. Durst was charged with Black's murder, not realizing that the suspect was filthy rich. The judge set bail at $300,000, which Durst quickly raised. "We arrested a haggard-looking man who drove an old car and lived in a $300 a month apartment with no telephone. He didn't look or act anything like a millionaire," Galveston Police Lieutenant Mike Putnell said. Durst jumped bail and fled the jurisdiction. For 6 weeks, he was a fugitive, moving constantly and using aliases to avoid detection. He managed to elude police until he was caught shoplifting at a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. In the end, the elusive fugitive was done in by a chicken salad sandwich. Durst had $500 on him. Another $37,000 in cash was found in the trunk of his rented car, alongside a handgun, some marijuana, and Morris Black's driver's license. Robert Durst was tried in Texas for the murder of Morris Black. He pleaded not guilty by reason of self-defense or accident. High-powered attorney Dick Guerin headed up Durst's legal team. The defense contended that Black had attacked Durst and that his death had been an unfortunate accident. Durst took the stand and told jurors that Black had entered his apartment while he was out. He said he came home to find his neighbor watching TV and holding the gun Durst kept hidden in a kitchen cabinet. They fought, and then Black began waving the gun at him, he claimed. I was concerned that Morris was going to shoot the gun, most likely at my face, he said. According to Durst, Black died struggling for the gun in a tragic accident. Afterward, in a panic, Durst said he cut up Black's body. I did not kill my best friend, he said. I did dismember him. The prosecution argued that Durst had ambushed Black from behind, shooting him in the head. But since Black's head had not been recovered, the prosecution was unable to disprove Durst's version of the event. In a risky move, the prosecution had decided to charge Durst only with murder. The jury was not given the option to convict the defendant on lesser-included charges such as manslaughter in the first or second degrees. It was all or nothing. The gamble paid off for the defense. Robert Durst was acquitted of Morris Black's murder. After 3 days of poring through all of the physical evidence, including testimony from witnesses, there was nothing to support the prosecution's claim that it was not self-defense. Juror Chris Lovell told Court TV. Kathy McCormick's friends and family were shocked and dismayed by the not guilty verdict. Even Durst seemed to be stunned by the jury's decision. Durst beat the murder rap, but he wasn't in the clear. Prosecutors charged him with bail jumping and evidence tampering, both felonies. He pleaded guilty and served 5 months in prison before being released on parole. 5 months later, Durst was back in jail for violating his parole. To this day, Westchester DA Jeanine Pirro is anxious to speak with him about his first wife's disappearance, but Durst remains tight-lipped. Pirro vows to get to the bottom of what happened to Kathy Durst, one way or another. Kathleen McCormick has never been found. She was declared legally dead in 2001. The McCormicks have long since come to terms with the fact that Kathy is most likely dead. Still, they long for closure and a proper burial. Jim McCormick still remembers the first time he held his baby sister. Kathy was just days old and so full of life and promise. He remains in close contact with the detectives investigating her disappearance and works with the press to keep Kathy from being forgotten. It's like leaving the porch light on, he said of his ongoing efforts. I'm hoping Kathy will see the light and know that we haven't stopped searching for her.